You ever get feedback in your life and it was kind of hard to hear? I know I have, and that can certainly be a bit of a challenging experience. But there is research about how mindfulness and feedback literacy can help with that. Hi, my name is Ted Meissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. If you would please tap the subscribe button if you have a moment. It helps a great deal before we get into today's conversation with three researchers around feedback literacy and mindfulness. Our guests today are Erin Isings. Erin, welcome to the podcast. Glad to see you.
Thank you.
And Cecilia Dong. Cecilia, glad you can be here as well.
Thank you.
And Christine Bell. Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so glad all of you can be here because it's a rare treat to be able to have several co-authors of a paper. And I know there's so much we can dig into on this, but what I'd like to do is just start by introducing each of yourselves just a little bit about who you are and your background. And I'm wondering, Cecilia, maybe we could start with you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Cecilia Dong. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Dentistry at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University in London, Ontario, Canada.
Great. Thank you. And Erin, how about you?
My name's Erin Isings. I am an assistant professor and teaching scholar in the Faculty of Information and Media Studies, also at Western University.
Great. Thanks so much. And Christine, how about you?
Hi, I am Christine Bell. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Physiology and Pharmacology. I'm also a teaching scholar, and that's in the faculty of Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, also at Western University.
Great. So again, welcome so much to have you here. I'm so glad that you could join us. And we're going to be talking about feedback for students. And before we dive into the research itself, I wonder if I could ask each of you how this paper came about. How did it start? Maybe, Christine, we could start with you.
Yeah, so we met actually at a campus Center for Teaching and Learning journal club, where the three of us were talking about a journal article on teaching and learning. And when we talked afterwards, we all recognized that there was something that we were starting to see in our students. We started getting more emails, more concerned emails from students about struggling with when they would get feedback, how to manage that feedback, how to interact with that feedback, oftentimes wanting a lot more, but not having yet had the opportunity to really process through the feedback they've already gotten. And we recognized that all three of us were seeing this pattern. And so we started discussing what does that mean for our students? We started seeing that there were resources that perhaps the students needed to be able to engage more efficiently and more effectively with the feedback that they were getting.
Great. And Erin, how about for you? Anything you'd like to add to that from your perspective of how this got started?
So I think after that, we continued the conversation with the discussion again of really shared experiences in terms of what we were seeing and hearing from our students. Then we began conversations with our Center for Teaching and Learning at Western University. We began looking more closely into the scholarship around feedback literacy and also the multidisciplinary aspects of our group was something that we were considering. And the end story of that is that we founded the Feedback Literacy and Learning Collaborative. But there were a few other pieces along the way, which we'll get to when we talk about the paper.
Great. And Cecilia, about for you, is there anything else you'd like to add into this?
Well, meeting at the Center for Teaching and Learning was an area where I was able to meet Christine and Erin, who are from different disciplines. And so we decided to build a multidisciplinary team where we were looking at feedback literacy and then talking about how our students, even though they're from different disciplines, they're still having the same struggles. And we were really interested in exploring how mindfulness could help support students in developing feedback literacy. And in order for us to have expertise in mindfulness, we were able to make connections with our mindfulness ambassadors, Lisa McCorkadale from School of Occupational Therapy and Thomas Telfer from law, as well as Tracy Ropp, who is a mindfulness expert who was counseling students in their academic work.
Terrific. And I'm wondering, Cecilia, if we could stay with you because you brought up a very important aspect of this work as we shift into exploring what this paper was and what it was about, the 6-week program on it. You mentioned that this was students from different backgrounds, from different disciplines. And to me, that's one of the most fascinating aspects to it. Maybe you can say a little bit about how did the program itself come about? What does that look like?
Before we developed this program, we actually needed more background information on if students were mindful and what level of feedback literacy they had. And we also wanted to understand how much academic stress were they experiencing in higher education. So our first step, which we've published on in our first paper as a team, centers on research where we conducted surveys where we recruited students from our courses that we were teaching. So we recruited from health sciences, medical sciences, law, and Faculty of Information Media Studies. And from the survey, we used the short validated scales in stress as well as mindfulness. And then we also had from the first feedback literacy scale, we also took select questions from this. And students were able to answer what was actually within about 5 minutes. We were able to gather enough information to see if there were any relationships between academic stress, mindfulness, and feedback literacy. And we already know that mindfulness can help people with stress, and that did show up in our study that students who were mindful had less stress. But what was really interesting is we found the first signs of there was a correlation between mindful students actually had higher feedback literacy. And to gain further insight from our survey results, we conducted focus groups where we learned about their emotions that they were experiencing on receipt of feedback, and then their strategies that they were employing, and even what awareness they had of mindfulness. And we learned that there was an openness to learn more about mindfulness, and that they hadn't actually connected that mindfulness could be applicable to feedback. And they really appreciated that that we were starting this conversation with them. And we know with mindfulness that the most obvious connection between mindfulness and feedback literacy is to help students manage affect or their emotions.
Beautifully said. And you brought up a really important aspect to this that I've seen in research and brought in with previous guests about the effect of stress on students and recent research around how nursing students, as an example, are already burned out before they become nurses and start a job. This is during the training program. So work like this is so very important. Erin, I'm wondering if you might jump in around just the structure of what happened next with the development of a program based on the feedback that Cecilia was just describing. How did that play out?
Well, as Cecilia mentioned, we noticed that students had an openness to learning more. So we saw there was a real need. And students were the students who we talked to were very open to that. So we built mindfulness and feedback literacy course. It consisted of 6 30-minute lessons that were accessible online. We embedded it into our existing courses so that students could access it asynchronously and anonymously. And it helps them to apply mindfulness during the feedback literacy process. So we published a paper on that course through the Community Journal of Mental Health. And over the course of that paper, over the course of building the course itself, that was where we consulted with our mindfulness ambassadors, who Cecilia had mentioned earlier, but also with our own institution's Center for Teaching and Learning, and as well instructional designers, to really promote a student-friendly feel to the course.
And that is so important because without that sense of this is for me, I'm in the right spot, and understanding how it can be helpful with a challenging thing like feedback can be very limited in the positive benefits that may come from it. So, Christine, how about for you in this transition from, okay, now there's a program that we're integrating into students to see the effects. Now we're getting to learning a little bit more about the impact on that. Can you describe a bit about how that came about, and maybe starting to take a look at what was found? How was this helpful, if it was at all?
Well, it definitely was helpful. The number of students that we had take the course and are continuing to take the course is growing. The course is now available through our Student Development and Success Center here at Western, and we've managed to share the course as well with other faculty members and as well as other institutions. So it has had a positive impact from the student perspective. But to really look and see what's going on, what are the students gaining from this course, we did do focus groups. So students were again recruited, and again recruited from a multidisciplinary perspective. So we had some phys pharm students, we had some students from FIMS, from occupational therapy, and from dentistry. And these students were both undergraduate and graduate students. So we had a nice mix of different developmental trajectories in terms of their learning. Now, from our focus groups, so the students went through the course, and we allowed them to go through the course at their own pace. So we recommended maybe one lesson a week for 6 weeks, and some students decided to follow that. But student schedules are very variable, let's say. And so some students actually devoured the course and went through it within 4 or 5 days and were so excited about it. So from our focus groups that we did afterwards, we discussed, like, how did this impact you? What did you gain from this course? What was sort of the most meaningful moments? And we focused specifically on our first lesson, which was looking at going from autopilot to being present. And then our last lesson, having students reflect on the entire course and thinking about how can this then support them in their work readiness and moving on to that next transition, that professional position. And students were just absolutely surprised at how much autopilot their lives were undergoing. And one of the most interesting things that a student said was, this made me realize that I'm supposed to be in one of the most exciting times of my life, and I'm missing it. I'm just missing it. And that, I think, impact all of us to say, yes, the different demands for your attention, whether that be social media or your academics, and you're always thinking of the future. That was one of the other big things that came up from all of our papers. Students are so concerned, they are so distracted by future worry that when they saw the mindfulness piece of being present, of enjoying this moment, it was almost as if it opened up this new door to them of, now I can actually, I'm permitted to be in this moment and enjoy it, and not allow the distraction of the worry in the future to take away from the richness of this present time.
Beautifully said. And I actually like to shift. That's a really good segue. One of the things that you just mentioned was around asking the students, what did you get out of this?
Mhm.
And I'd like to shift now to each of you and your own encounter with developing this, being on this journey. What did you get out of this? What are the things that are the highlights for you as a person, as a teacher, that stand out that you recall? And Christine, if we could maybe stay with you on that.
Yes. So I'm going to say two things. The work from Kristen Neff was really, really important. So she really talked about that self-compassion, and that self-compassion can look both te like tender care or like advocacy. And being able to share that with the students, I thought was so powerful, that it's not about just accepting anything that happens, that you can mindfully advocate for yourself and for others was really powerful, and still really powerful in my life. That advocating is such an important piece, and it's even impacted my other research. And I think the other piece that I got out of this whole process was the importance of our students. We had two amazing students working on this project with us, developing it. Hugh Sampson is also very committed to mindfulness, and just the amount that we've learned from our students has then impacted all of our future research into always, as much as possible, having students as partners. So not just to do the research, but to conceptualize the research and develop the research. And now we work with about 5 different students on various projects, and they're so great. It's so nice to hear their perspective, and it keeps keeping me humble of not always being that sage on the stage. I know what's best. We don't want that. We definitely want to have a much more organic experience, and one that's for students, by students, with students. So that's been really enriching for me.
And that is such an important aspect of developing any kind of program. If you can have development input from those impacted by it, in this case, students, that really, really brings a richness to it for things that we might not have thought of from our perspective. As you said, we're not sages. We don't know everything and need to understand what that perspective is. Thank you for that. And Cecilia, how about for you? What is something that for you that you got out of this process or that was particularly memorable for you?
Well, I think in terms of teaching, it really makes me more aware of how students are, their strategies for managing our feedback, and how I can incorporate what I know about feedback literacy and mindfulness into my teaching. And because our focus groups were run by our graduate research assistants, I think our participants felt safe and vulnerable in terms of the degree to which they shared their experiences with feedback with us. And especially for a dental student participant who mentioned that in her second year of dental school, being unhappy for most of the year because she's sitting and hearing positive feedbacks given to her peers, and her feedback isn't quite as positive. And when she participated in this research study, she was in fourth year, and she was a lot more reflective and had learned about mindfulness. And she recognized that mindfulness was applicable for her as she was working with a patient and even in her personal life. And I know from what she mentioned is that when she's hearing more positive feedback to other students, that we're not in an environment where we can't overhear other feedback, but in terms of how we frame it, we can possibly help students be more accepting of our feedback. And especially when students have such a busy schedule, they're rushing to get to our course. And I don't want them just to be physically present. And I hope by making the mindfulness and feedback literacy course available as an option alongside my course materials, that they can also be mentally present to be able to learn better.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful layers to what you brought up. The important aspect of feedback being held at a container of psychological safety where people can be vulnerable and it'll be okay. It'll still be listened to. That's not just a necessary have to, but a welcome, intentional part of this, and that it's not just about what we do in the classroom. This can carry over into our personal lives as well. Beautiful share. Thank you for that. And Erin, how about for you? What are some of the highlights for you or personal impacts to this work?
Well, Ted, there were so many impacts for me from this work. As Christine said, I learned so much from working with students, but I also learned a lot from the students who participated in the focus groups. One of, or multiple students talked about being able to apply this mindfulness that they had learned in the context of feedback literacy, but being able to apply that to personal situations outside of school and how that really had had an impact on their well-being. So, for example, one of the students talked about, like during the focus group, they were back in their hometown and they needed to go to the grocery store. And that was a very uncomfortable situation for them, right? Presumably because they're going to run into people from their hometown. And they talked about how they were able to apply the mindfulness techniques that they learned in the course to support them, to support themselves during that time. And that got me thinking a lot about how to apply mindfulness in those situations. And for myself, but then on the teaching side of things, it got me really thinking about how important it is not just to be teaching content to students, but also to guide them in how to learn and how to care for themselves while they're learning.
That is such an important aspect of this work that you're doing. And actually, this is one of the final questions that I have for you is what do you want to see next? Growing out of this body of work that you've been doing, there's a trajectory here. What do you want to see happen next? And what else would you like to share with the viewers? And maybe, Erin, we can stay with you on that one.
Okay, so our research has, like this sort of research, in terms of next steps for me, it's led us to address a really specific need that we had been seeing. So, a common practice in universities is when feedback is returned, the instructor asks the student to please not contact for clarification until after 24 hours. And the idea is that students would take the 24 hours to review the feedback, to reflect on the feedback, and then they would be prepared to have a discussion about it. What we had found though was that although that practice is fairly widespread of asking students to pause for 24 hours, students don't necessarily receive instructions on what to do during that pause. And we worked with students again as partners to create some collaborative, created some collaborative resources that we expect to be releasing in the coming weeks, but it's really to support students during those 24 hours to really help them to be able to process the feedback that they do receive. In terms of my personal reflection on that, I'll just say I have no concerns about our future. Our students are so incredibly capable. I'm really excited about the future direction.
Thank you for that. And maybe Cecilia, you next on that same question about what do you like to see next, whether it's planned or not yet planned, or anything else you'd like to share with the viewers.
Well, from our research, like since starting our research team here, with Erin and Christine and I as co-leads and forming the Feedback Literacy and Learning Collaborative, we really have a desire for our research to have an impact beyond our research papers and academic presentations. So we're really excited that we're able to share this through the conversation. And now with a podcast with you, we are trying our best to impact the learning culture in higher education where mindfulness is not just talked about outside of universities, whether it's incorporated into our courses or even just being there as an optional resource to support student learning and well-being. We really feel that by sharing our resources inside and outside Western University with as broad an audience as possible beyond our disciplines, that we can have an impact.
Yeah, you can. And that the already interdisciplinary work is a terrific start to it. Thank you for sharing that. And how about Christine, for you? Same thing. What do you want to see happen or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, building on what Cecilia said, part of the reason we're excited to share our research is when we have shared, we've had really positive reception of the research. And a lot of instructors have turned to us and said, when are you going to make an instructor module? When are you going to teach other instructors how to receive feedback or how to give feedback mindfully? And even small tips and tricks like when do you send feedback to students? Is it 9 p.m. on a Friday evening? Or do you think about it and decide to send it out on a Monday morning when they might have more mental capacity to receive the feedback? And so our research is looking at how can we support instructors. And one of the ways that we're taking this research, as well as seeing that instructors do have that desire to give quality, good feedback and to support their students, but also recognizing that that might bump up against some restrictions due to time or resources or really large class sizes. And so we're looking to see if such things as generative AI can help support students through the feedback literacy process. So not providing the feedback through Gen AI, that's still important to be delivered by the professor or the instructor. But then when you receive that feedback, can Gen AI support the student maybe through that 24 hours or beyond, help organize the feedback, find patterns in the feedback, and help to identify any kind of skills that the student could grow in so that the next time they approach their assignments, they are better equipped because they've been able to really engage with the feedback and use it to the best of their ability with support from Gen AI. So that's what we're working on now. We've started some of the survey information to see how interested students are. We were overwhelmed with the number of students who want to participate in our next steps, which are workshops. Those will be happening in the new year, and we're excited to see if perhaps there's some other ways that we can support instructors and students in their feedback literacy and mindfulness journeys.
That sounds terrific. And for those who are watching this, I'm going to have a list of links where links are found, however you're consuming this content. And I'm hoping that this is at the very least inspirational and perhaps opens some collaborative opportunities to share learning about feedback and how to maximize that being beneficial to students and maybe in other parts of our lives as well. So our guest today, thank you so much for being here, Cecilia Dong. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Christine Bell, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And Erin Isings, thank you especially for coordinating today's conversation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining today. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope our guests will be returning soon with more information about their ongoing programs. And in the meantime, please do be sure to tap that subscribe button. It would really help this podcast be found by others. Remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can, and I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.